Good evening. My name is Gabriel Sachs, Gary Sachs. I'm the Executive Director for an organization called South African Friends of Israel. All communities, all religions are welcome to open a dialogue, an interfaith dialogue with the Jewish community through our organization called South African Friends of Israel. We bring out a number of international guest speakers that come and explain what's happening in Israel, what's happening in the Middle East, and explain how we get through the crisis and how we try to negotiate a peace within the Middle East. So obviously, coming from the Jewish community, a lot of people take the rhetoric of Israel being a discriminatory nation. And we have to engage with them. We have to be a voice to the BDS that are streaming on campus calling Israel an apartheid state. We have to respond to that call, educate the communities, and come to understand that Israel, not only is it not an apartheid state, it enshrines the values and morals that Christianity, Judaism, and our Constitution enshrine. And that is the voice that South African Friends of Israel has to portray to the rest of the community when we have this hatred being spewed out by our enemies in South Africa. This Sunday, we're actually hosting one of our largest annual conferences, the 13th of March. We're bringing international speakers, we're bringing Druze leadership, we're bringing Israeli leadership to come and explain the case for Israel. How do you argue the case for Israel? And we're bringing 450 Christian leaders to this event. So if you're willing to sign up, I do have some registration forms, and we'd be happy to host you on this coming Sunday. It is from 8:30 in the morning till 5. So right after your service, you are more than welcome to join us. We do have registration forms, and we're happy to have you. But the reason we're here tonight, Zeev Ben-Shachar, he is the Director for Israel Education at Jerusalem University, and he is the person that creates a huge amount of movies, footage, and PowerPoint presentations that advocate and teach people how to advocate for Israel. What is happening within Israel, and how do you argue those salient points that people accuse the Jewish country, the Jewish state of Israel, as being this apartheid state. So it's my privilege to now hand you over to Zeev, and thank you for having us here tonight, and God bless.
Thank you. Goeienaand. Hoe gaan dit? Baie goed, baie goed. Very honored to be here in your community. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Alida, for the introduction and for bringing us here. Thank you, Gavi. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. Can you all hear me at the back also? You can see okay? Everyone's comfortable? Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into this work of Israel advocacy. I'm originally from Israel. I was born in a place called Ramat Gan. And at the age of 7, I moved with my family to a little town that some of you may know of. It's called Vaalpark. And I spent 5 years at Vaalpark, and I came to Sasolburg a lot, and I played in the squash courts in Vanabel, and went to the Vaal River. So 5 years, this is a very moving experience for me to come back. I haven't been here for 28 years, basically. So it's such an honor. At the age of 12, I came back to Israel. I went to high school, served in the army in a unit called Givati, which is an infantry unit that is accountable for the southern border. I spent a whole year in the Gaza Strip. Have you heard of the Gaza Strip? People heard? Right. Afterwards, I worked in security for a couple of years in the Israeli airport, and then moved to America. I spent 8 years in America studying psychology. I was going to be a psychologist. That's what I wanted to do with my life. And I spent 8 years there, both studying and then teaching in Boston. I came back to Israel. It was 2005. And I was going to continue that path of psychology. Now, what happened was, I came back to an Israel that was markedly different from the time that I was away. Those years were the Second Intifada. Has anyone heard of the Second Intifada? Violence, ongoing violence that claimed the lives of thousands of Israelis and Palestinians. And And so in that sense, Israel wasn't doing too well. But I came back to Israel and I was blown away by the innovation and by the infrastructure and by the roads and by Israel that had become a startup nation. And that really moved me as an Israeli. On the other hand, what I heard in the news, what I heard in the media, both in Israel but also abroad, in Europe, in America, was the negative stuff. The accusation that Israel's an apartheid state, that Israel uses too much force in Gaza, disproportionate force, that the checkpoints are the real problem, the settlements. And it bothered me that there wasn't a nuanced view of Israel, that all the focus was on the negative stuff. And so those are the reasons where for which I gradually moved into the field of Israel advocacy, and I started teaching students that come to Israel on a gap year program, on a year program between high school and college. I would teach them a course about the Arab-Israeli conflict and about how to make the case, how to support Israel in your community on college campuses, because, as you know, there is a dire need for that today. So every year we have about 20 different schools, about 700 students that learn about Israel from us. And then the rest of my time, I work for Jerusalem U, which Jerusalem U is a production house, a film company actually, that makes films about Israel, about Jewish identity, about the history of the land of Israel. We make films, and I write the curriculum for these films. We also have a curriculum which may interest you because you can watch it online, you can view it online, a film-based curriculum where you learn about Israel and about the Holy Land through short films. Let me show you a short clip of a recent film that we made. It's called Beneath the Helmet, and this is a film that tells the story of the Israeli army and Israel through the eyes of 5 soldiers. 5 Israeli soldiers as they transform from high school students, 18 years old, to Israeli soldiers in an infantry unit, the paratroopers.
It's not a choice to go to the army. Everyone has to serve. It's the law in Israel. This is very complicated, you know? 1 minute ago, I was with my friend at the beach. And now I'm here.
עליתי מאתיופיה לפני 8 שנים. אביעד. מן הסתם אמא שלי לא רוצה שאני לוחם.
My name is Oren. I'm from Switzerland. All the Israelis that met me told me that I'm crazy.
ליין ישר, ברור?
כן, המפקדת!
כמפקדת זה מאוד קשה להפריד בין שני העולמות.
תוך שנייה פורצת מלחמה בלי לשים לב. ויש לנו 8 חודשים להכשיר אותם, להפוך אותם מאזרחים לחיילים.
נשק 60 מעלות, יש לך כדור בקנה! מה יש לכם? המשימה היא לא פשוטה, אבל המשימה היא חשובה, להגן על מדינת ישראל.
this is what we do. Now, many people ask me, so is Jerusalem U a political organization? Do you have a political agenda? And it's important to address this. And the answer is yes and no. No, we don't take a stand on policy issues of the Israeli government, on the one-state or the two-state solution. I have my views, of course. This is not something that we promote in our classes. But yes, we are definitely Zionist and pro-Israel, and unashamedly so. We believe in Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. We believe in Israel's right to defend itself. And so in that sense, we are political. Now, as I said, I came back from America. It was 8 years that I was in Boston. And the reality was that most people didn't really care. You know, you ask them about Israel, they didn't really know much, they didn't really care. There was apathy. Okay? And I want to show you a short clip that demonstrates this phenomenon of what people in the University of California, Los Angeles, they did a survey on campus, not a scientific survey. They just asked people, what do you know about the Middle East? And I think you'll find their answers a little bit entertaining.
And today we're on the campus of UCLA, and we're talking to the kids that go here to find out what they know about Israel. And I think you'd be very shocked to find out how much they do know and how much they don't know. So we're going to ask you a couple of questions about the Middle East. Do you know anything about it at all?
So-so.
What is the only democracy in the Middle East? Is it Iran, Lebanon, Israel, or Syria? The only democracy.
Iran, I guess.
Nope.
Iran.
Right. I didn't know any of the answers either.
I'm going to guess Lebanon.
Right.
I think I'm going to say Syria.
Syria.
Turkey?
Turkey.
Turkey, okay. Talking about Turkey, Thanksgiving is coming, so we love Turkey.
So that means I was wrong.
Yes, it was Israel there.
Okay.
Yes. You're from one of the, like we said, the biggest Muslim country in the world. How many Muslim countries are there in the world? 10, 23, 43, or 56?
Try and count them.
That would be, we'd run out of film.
Majority Muslim population.
Majority Muslim population, like in Indonesia.
23. 23?
It's more than that.
23?
I'm going to go with 23.
23. 43.
You only got two more to guess.
53.
It's 56. And how many Jewish countries are in the world? 1, 6, 13, or 20? 1,
Jewish
6, 13, or 20?
7.
7. Yeah. Huh? That's all right.
13.
13.
I'm going to say 6.
15.
15 Jewish countries. Yeah, there's a lot of, especially in this area, you have a tremendous amount of Jewish people. That's true. How long have Arab Palestinians considered themselves a people?
I would say 1,000 years.
How long has there been a Jewish presence in the land of Israel, you think?
I would guess 75?
75 years.
Yes.
Absolutely, the Jews have been there for 75 years. What is Hamas? Do you know what it is? Is it a type of spread or dip? Is it a humanitarian aid group, a new music group that's coming up now, or a terrorist group?
Type of dip.
Dip. Yeah, you like Middle Eastern food?
Music group?
Yeah, they definitely, absolutely, Hamas does play music. There's no doubt about it. They're sort of, working things out, but maybe one day they'll be big.
Hummus?
Yeah.
The food?
Yeah, the food.
I don't know exactly what it is, but I love it, and you can do it with pita bread, and I think it's really good.
My favorite, olives, and it's just
Yeah,
unbelievable.
it's really good.
Unbelievable.
All right. This shows the situation on many campuses, not only in America and Europe, and I'm sure here in South Africa. And in a sense, it doesn't have to worry us, because what do we know about different conflicts all over the world? North Korea, South Korea. So that shouldn't be an issue. The problem begins when something happens. And into this void of ignorance, we hear the negative sentiment. So, for example, this is a picture from the Second Intifada. Second Intifada, violence that claimed the lives of thousands of Israelis and Palestinians. Ongoing. On a daily basis, people couldn't go into restaurants and buses. It was much worse than what's going on today. And there was a thought, I had that thought for sure, that because the world understands the threat of terrorism, because it was after September 11, then world public opinion would start supporting Israel. That was the thought. And the truth is, after September 11, we had a grace period of a few months. But afterwards, it went downhill. And we see more and more demonstrations on college campuses against Israel, against Zionism. We just made a film about the situation on some campuses, not on all universities, but in some places. In America, it's becoming a problem. It's called Crossing the Line, and it's about when criticism of Israel crosses the line into anti-Semitism. It's not always the same, by the way, but sometimes it crosses the line, and this is what this film is about.
I would have never said a year ago that this would happen on my campus. 30% Jews, this would never happen. It happened.
People were calling us fascists, Nazis, right on the Student Senate floor.
I've seen the very difficult situation that Jewish students face.
They are on the front line. They're the ones who are exposed.
There are going to be moments where you feel scared.
Students are definitely intimidated.
You Zionist scums. My only purpose today is that this event is shut down.
The negativity on campus make it difficult for me to be open about supporting Israel.
The way you oppose Jews in any given era is different. Because this is the era of the Jewish state, the attack of anti-Semites is focused on that. This is the anti-Semitism of our time. It's not even a question.
And this is part of a larger trend, where if you look at world public opinion relating to different countries, you can see that Israel's right at the bottom. This is not surprising to you, I'm sure. But when they ask thousands of people all over the world whether a country has a positive or a negative influence on the world, Israel's right at the bottom here with North Korea, Iran, and Pakistan, which is not a very good neighborhood to be in. So that's what we're dealing with. And then in 2005, this is after the Second Intifada, some of you may have heard about the disengagement from Gaza. Basically, Israel decided to leave the Gaza Strip. 10,000 Jews were evacuated from their homes, moved into Israel, and Israel left the Gaza Strip and thought that this would bring about peaceful coexistence with our neighbors in Gaza. But those of you who have followed the news know that since then we've had thousands, in fact over 20,000 Qassam rockets that have been launched at Israeli cities. Essentially now the entire country is under threat. So that didn't change the situation either. And even the rockets didn't improve public opinion regarding Israel. Because people see pictures like this, and a picture is worth 1,000 words. Maybe until 1967, Israel was considered the underdog. But after 67, the Six-Day War, and gradually we gained more power, we became strong. And we're no longer, in the eyes of the world, considered the underdog. And this is a picture of an Israeli plane which was attacking a terrorist launching pad in Gaza. But again, most people don't take the time to get the context. We live in a very quick world. Everyone is on their iPhones, on their cell phones, and they get the headlines, but not the entire picture. There's no context here as to why Israel went in there in the first place. And you can see here this terrible picture of a Palestinian holding his baby. And people see a picture like that and they've decided, because they don't know what happened, but they want the suffering to stop. So there's a principle in communication that says that emotions decide, reason justifies. The masses make up their mind based on what they feel, based on emotion. Then they will use reason, intellect, to justify their initial decision. And when they see a picture like this, we have lost the public relations war. Now again, in the past, Israel may have been considered the David in the conflict, but this is not the case anymore. We have a strong army, we have a police. The classic picture of a Palestinian boy throwing a stone at an Israeli tank. People have decided. That's the problem. So in the first part of this presentation, I just want to outline what we're dealing with. And I want to nuance it and say that it's not happening everywhere. And that there are many communities, such as your own, really supporting Israel. And that in most universities, at least in North America, people don't really know or care. But it's a growing problem. It's growing, and there's more and more anti-Israel sentiment out there, and part of it relates to the media. Have you all heard of what happened in Paris a couple of months ago? The media reports this as a terror attack. It's very straightforward. A bunch of terrorists went into different places, different venues in Paris, and started shooting people indiscriminately. Terror attack. Over 100 people were killed. And yet when an American student in Israel is killed in a shooting attack, the media calls it just an attack. It's not clear sometimes, based on the articles, what has happened in Israel. So here's another example of an article that I found in Wisconsin, in America. Now, you read the headline over here, immediately you think that there's a culprit here, and it's Israel. Again, we live in a very quick world. Not too many people will take the time to dig deeper and to see that actually it was two Palestinian men, terrorists, that were armed with knives that boarded the bus, and that's why the Israelis responded. So we have to learn to take things with a grain of salt. Another example that I found here in the Times. Palestinian killed, 10 wounded by Israeli gunfire at camp. Only if you read in the lines, between the lines, you understand that these are two Israelis that got lost. They used Waze and they got lost. They made their way into the Kalandia camp, and there they were ambushed. And Israel responded, so Palestinians were killed. So we have to take a time to contextualize. And another film that I invite you to watch, also you can find it online, it's called Media 101. It's about reading the news with a grain of salt, and it's about Israel, but it's actually about the news in general. How do we get an educated view of reality? By reading the news.
There's huge liberal media bias.
Conservative media
And that's
bias.
why there is the greatest built-in bias.
The media are biased.
Media bias.
Media
bias.
Dramatic move today by an anchor for the network Russia Today America. Her name is Liz Wall. She accused her employer of glossing over the actions of Vladimir Putin, and then on the air, she quit.
I cannot be part of a network funded by the Russian government that whitewashes the actions of Putin. I saw censorship like I've never seen it before, and at that point, for me, that was a red line.
also something that you can access online, Media 101, reading between the lines. This also affects Israel in the day-to-day. So we're not just talking about a few news items, we're not just talking about a number of colleges, we're talking about universities, students that choose to boycott Israel. There's the BDS campaign. Have you heard of the BDS campaign? It stands for Boycott, Divestment, Sanction. And essentially the story goes like this. Israel is now compared to South Africa pre-1994 apartheid, and the call to action is therefore boycott, divest, and sanction Israel. That's what they're saying. So it's affecting Israeli academic institutions. It's affecting government when you have people in the government supporting BDS. Some of you may have heard about the ANC's, or at least some in the ANC supporting that. It's affecting culture. You have artists that are signing petitions against Israel, canceling their concerts in Israel because they've had pressure from the BDS movement. So this is something real that we are dealing with. We also have supporters. These are some supporters that have actually signed petitions for Israel, supporting Israel's plight. We also have governments and representatives in the government that have supported or that have gone against the BDS movement. But it's clear that we have a problem, and it's very clear to realize this when you just go on Google and you enter apartheid. South African apartheid, you get about 18 million results. Okay? And Israel, about 16.5 million. So the analogy is genius. It works for them. And so the question is, what do we do with all of this? They also have what is called Israel Apartheid Week coming to a campus near you. It's actually happening now on some campuses in South Africa. We just went to a demonstration there. And they're saying many things. This year, the theme is intersectionality. What does it mean, intersectionality? It's a big word for saying that we are going to join with other oppressed groups, such as Black Lives Matter, such as oppressed groups in Europe, and we're going to join in forces against Israel. And this is their trailer.
Hey, hey, hey. Can you put my voice up? More, يا بحاش قبري شعب العشق السوري الافريقي يا بي لك حشيشة قلبي افريقيا لفلسطين ايد وحدي شابين صرخة وانقلاب مخيمات لاجئين من افريقيا لفلسطين ايد وحدي شابين صرخة وانقلاب مخيمات لاجئين بنقول لبابلون رغم القاهرة احنا هون يرجع عبد الناصر ومانديلا نيلسون والتحية للصوفية تحية للمذية تحية للبيئة من جميع انواع الروحانية تحية للشعب الراستفارقي صرخة وانقلاب مخيمات عودة لاجئين
Powerful. That's what we're dealing with. That is the problem in a nutshell. Now I want to address how to deal with this and what we, as people who support Israel, not blindly, but support Israel as a beacon of democracy in the region, as the homeland for the Jewish people, what we can do about it. We don't just have to, we don't need to sit still and do nothing. There are actually practical things that we can do. And in order to address this question, I want to do a short exercise with you. This is part of a bigger picture, and I would like you to guess what it is. Part of a bigger picture. Let's see if you know. Any guesses? You can be wrong, it's fine. The Western Wall. Thank you. Other guesses? The Western...
Piece of land.
Piece of land. Other thoughts? Maybe I'll give you another hint. Western Wall. Other guesses? You don't have to be right. No? Alina, you told me that this was a strong group. One more hint I'm going to give you. Can you tell me what it is? What? Let's see. I'm going to... map of Israel. That's very Zionist of you. I'm going to give you all the hints together. Anyone? Last guess? No? Mount of Sinai. Close. Actually, no. Here's what it is. Exactly. The line is that's right. Okay. But seriously now, the point of this exercise, as you can tell, is if you want to understand Israel today, if you want to understand the conflict, it is important to zoom out, to contextualize. Because this little part here might be a checkpoint in the Gaza Strip. This part might be the picture of suffering Palestinians, and it's true. There are Palestinians that are suffering. But if you just look at the snippet of the picture, you don't get the entire story. So we need to be able to zoom out. And I'm going to do that in a variety of ways. Because if we try to determine what's going on in the world by reading newspaper, it's like trying to tell the time by watching the second hand of a clock. You can't really get context. So let's look at the Middle East. This is a map that I got from a student of mine a long time ago. Took a class in high school called the Middle East conflict. Look at this map. Tell me if you have any issues. This is a map of the Middle East conflict that they used throughout the course. Any issues with this?
Yes.
What?
I don't like that West Bank not to be...
You don't like the West Bank, that it's
not part of Israel.
Not part of Israel. Other issues with this map of the Middle East conflict? Aside from that, it's okay. Just notice how we are used to thinking. And this, I mean, you're not any different, but how do we think about the conflict? This is the Middle East conflict, and yes, of course, we have a situation with the Palestinians. It's not working out, we're trying to figure it out, it's a major conflict. Are there, let me ask you, are there other conflicts in the region of the Middle East?
Yeah.
We know. 500,000 plus have been killed in Syria over the last 4 years. People in Saudi Arabia and Yemen border, clashes there, Sunnis and Shiites fighting each other, killing each other, Christians being persecuted in the Middle East. And yet in the thinking of the world, this is the Middle East conflict. Go to Google. Don't enter Israeli-Arab conflict. Enter Middle East conflict. And most of the results that you get is Israel and the Palestinians. Now again, I'm not saying that there isn't a problem here that we need to, of course we need to solve it. But we also need to zoom out and realize that this is a much bigger problem. And when I do this, and I show Israel in context, people are shocked. You can hardly see Israel here. Makes up 1/5 of 1% of the entire region of the Middle East. Fits into this area 500 times. And there are many other conflicts that have nothing to do with Israel. Again, Sunnis versus Shiites, and Iran perhaps on its way to a nuclear bomb, and proxies of Iran in north of Israel, in Lebanon, and Hamas funded by Qatar. So this is a regional conflict. And very important to realize that 20 of the 22 members of the Arab League still do not officially recognize Israel's right to exist. So we have a problem here. And it might be helpful to zoom out even more and to look at the world at large and realize that perhaps we have other powers that are related to the Middle East conflict, like China or Russia, and their pull in the area. And it's also helpful to look at levels of freedom in the world. This is a map that was created by Freedom House. Freedom House was started in the 1950s by Eleanor Roosevelt, and what they do is they color the world in different colors based on the levels of freedom. And a country that is purple is not free, relatively speaking. One that is yellow is partly free, and green is a free country. Again, not entirely free, but relatively speaking free. And if we zoom in to the Middle East, we can see that most of the Middle East is not free. It's not free. Women are being oppressed everywhere. Jews are almost non-existent aside from the state of Israel. The Christian population is decreasing dramatically in this area. And there are two green countries in this map, in the Middle East. Two countries that are not perfect democracies for sure, but still two countries, Tunisia and Israel. Why is this important and why is this so telling? Because I assert that there is a double standard when Israel is treated in the media, but also in the international community. And I'll give you a very simple example. Does it make sense to you? I'll read what it says. Does it make sense to you that the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is responsible for human rights in the world and for monitoring freedom and the rights of different groups in the world, does it make sense that over the last decade, its condemnations of Israel, 62, totaled more than the rest of the world combined? Like, where's Russia in this picture? Where's China? Where is Iran, Sudan, other places where human rights are non-existent? And again, I'm not saying that these things didn't happen in Israel. In fact, I'm sure more human rights violations happened in Israel over the last decade. I'm just saying that there is a double standard here. And then we have to point it out. And this double standard, the situation in the Middle East, doesn't only affect Israel, you should know. It affects Sunnis, Shiites in Islam, and it affects Christians. Another film that we're in the process of making is called Faith Keepers, and it's about Christian persecution in the Middle East. And it's very troubling, but we feel like it's an important film to make. So I want to show you a short promo to that film, and it should be coming out in a couple of months.
The current status of Christians and other non-Muslim minorities throughout the Middle East is the worst it's been in centuries.
21 people were killed when a powerful bomb exploded in front of a Coptic Christian church.
Muslim mobs began attacking Christian churches.
They are targeting churches, temples, cultural, historical sites.
سوريا وأنا لك بخاز شو سوريا جو العراق قتل خلي
يعني بغضوني بالقوة واغتصبوني وتقريبا 4 أيام 5 أيام رجعت للبيت. هو كان بسيارته راجع من شغله، لزموا ايده ورجله ورايدوا يقطعوا راسه.
I converted from Islam to Christianity. I was arrested, and after that they gave me a death penalty. What I told the judge in this day, if loving and worshiping Christ is a crime, I am guilty as charged.
The Christians of Iraq and Syria who fled ISIS narrowly escaped a genocidal campaign of mass murder, of crucifixions, and of beheadings.
Now we are here in Kawa Center for youth. We have here 186 caravan, 260 families here.
What is taking place in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq, is genocide.
They call this ethnic cleansing.
This is the real work.
The administration's failing, the Congress is failing, and quite frankly, with all due respect, the church is failing.
In response to persecution, I always want to tell people to pray. Stop, pray. Be burdened for your brother and sister, but get involved in the fight and help.
And doesn't matter how small is your voice, you can make a difference, even if you are just one person.
That's what we're dealing with. And so the point being is that maps make a difference, and the region, if you try to understand just zooming into Israel and the Palestinians, you have a problem. And studies have shown, actually, that when you ask people, a randomly chosen group in a university has shown this group, where Israel is in the center. They ask, who do you support, Israel or the Palestinians? They support the Palestinians. You show another randomly assigned group this map where Israel is in context, and you can see that it dramatically changes. Maps make a difference. I'm not going to test you right now. Should I test you? But for now, do you know where Israel is? Which number? Okay, 14. And just for fun, let's do another 2. What's 5? Saudi Arabia, right? And 7? Iran. Very good. But for now, what you need to know is this. That's a joke. Okay. Let me zoom out historically before we start wrapping up. If you think of the sound bites, when I say sound bites, I mean slogans, I mean little short phrases that carry strong meaning. For example, Nike's soundbite is just do it. Exactly. What are the soundbites, the anti-Israel soundbites, or sorry, what are the pro-Israel soundbites that are out there today? What do you hear people saying about Israel? Supporting Israel. Israel's what? The only, who said? Exactly. The only democracy in the Middle East. It champions human rights, and maybe you've heard that Israel invented the technology for the cell phone. Did you know that? Yeah, I did it in my lab downstairs. And the allegation that these sound bites address, if you think about it, is what? That we're the only democracy in the Middle East. What does that address? What claim? That Israel is a what state? Apartheid state, yafeh, very good. Yafeh means beautiful in Hebrew. And therefore, call to action, boycott Israel. You with me up until now? However, we have to dig deeper and contextualize. Because the bigger picture is not just apartheid, by the way. The bigger picture is Israel is guilty of what? What's the buzzword that everyone says? Racism, definitely. What else? What's the root cause of the conflict according to so many? Occupation. Thank you. Occupation, colonialism. That's what it is. And if I want to be more dramatic, the core allegation is that Palestine was stolen from the indigenous population. That's what they're saying. And if I want to be a bit more dramatic, we're a bunch of thieves. They're saying about the Jewish people. By the way, apartheid also integrates in that claim of occupation. They're saying that, you know, just like the British who came here, but we are a bunch of colonialists, we don't belong. We're not indigenous to the Middle East. That's the claim. Now, when someone calls you a thief, it doesn't matter that you're the only democracy in the Middle East because you still stole the land. It doesn't matter that Israel wants peace because who cares? It's our land. It doesn't matter that the Jews turned desert into skyscrapers. You still stole the land. If someone calls you a thief and you say, well, at least Israel invented cherry tomatoes, that's not going to work. When someone calls you a thief, there is only one appropriate response. And by the way, the claim that the Jews need a homeland because of persecution, because of the Holocaust, I also don't use that as justifying the right of the Jewish people. Because the Holocaust happened in Europe. Why don't the claim, the counter-argument is, go establish a state in Europe. Why do the Palestinians have to suffer? It can't be the sole reason why we're living in our homeland. When someone calls you a thief, there's only one appropriate response. If you're not, what is it? What's the response? It's very simple. Like a kid. How would a kid answer this? What's that? Not guilty. No, we're not. Exactly. And the problem is we're not saying that enough. We're saying Israel invented the cell phone, we're a democracy, we want peace, but when they call us a thief, there's no way that we can answer like that. Now you have to explain why. What gives the Jewish people a right to a state in the land of Israel? This is not the place to do this and to start going over all these rights. But I'll just mention briefly, if we talk about divine rights, it's from the very beginning. From the very beginning it says to Abraham, Sa na enecha ure min hamakom asher ata sham tzafona v'negba v'kedma v'yama ki et kol haaretz asher ata roeh lecha etnena ulezarecha ad olam. Okay, from this place where you are, take a look to the north and to the south, to the east and to the west. For all the land which you see I give to you, to your seed forever, to Abraham. Divine rights. The first Rashi, I don't know if you've heard about the interpreter Rashi, but even he, 1,000 years ago, realized the importance of the of Israel advocacy and the justness of the cause. It was said it was not necessary to begin the Torah, the Bible, except from this month is to you. That's the first commandment of the Torah. But that's not how it starts, which is the first commandment that the Israelites were commended. Now, for what reason did he commence with in the beginning? For if the nations of the world should say to Israel, you are robbers, for you conquered by force the lands of the 7 nations of Canaan, they will reply, the entire earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed be He. Even Rashi 1,000 years ago realized the importance of advocacy. It's amazing. If we look at indigenous and native rights, it is important to realize that going back 3,000 years, Joshua leads the Jewish people into the land of Israel, 13th century BCE. The tribes settle in what is Israel today. It's the same Israel. The tribe of Dan settled in Tel Aviv, which is why when I take a bus today in Tel Aviv, it's called the Dan bus. Did you know that? Yeah. And it's not just like we were in the desert hanging out on our way elsewhere. This was the Jewish homeland. We had 2 temples, we had foreign relations, we had a government, and most importantly, 3,000 years of continuous presence in the land of Israel. 3,000 years. Even during exile, there were always Jews there. And when we pray for rain in the morning prayer, we don't pray for rain in Texas, we pray for rain in Israel. We've always kept that connection. 3,000 years. And 1,000 years of Jewish presence, of Jewish sovereignty, self-rule in the land of Israel, which is unlike any other people. This is significant. This is significant in justifying what it is that we're doing in Israel and why we established the Jewish state in Israel and not in Uganda or Argentina. First temple period, second temple period, it goes on and on. And let me just show you what that looks like in 1 minute. This is very telling. Let me just get to this thing. So I'm going to show you what 3,000 years of history in the land of Israel looked like. And by the way, who called it Palestine? The Romans, in a way of alienating the Jews, called it Palestine. They changed it from Israel to Palestine. Why Palestine? Because the Philistines were the ancient rivals of the Jews. And so they wanted to alienate them from their homeland. So they changed the language, they exiled the Jewish people. This is what 3,000 years of history in the land of Israel looks like. That was 3,000 years of history in the land of Israel, which was then named Palestine. And there's something really significant, and this is what I want you to get from this whole presentation. What is different from the time, between the time that the Jews were there, we're talking about, give or take, 1,000 years self-rule, and every other time in 3,000 years? What's different? How is it different from other rule of Palestine, Israel during that time? This is the point that I want you to get. If you think about it, what was Rome at the time? What's that?
World Empire.
Exactly. It was an empire. In every other time in history, aside from when the Jews were there, it was always, the land of Israel was always ruled by a foreign empire, a colonial foreign emperor, whether from Rome or whether from Turkey, the Ottomans, or whether from London, the Brits, always. The only time that it was self-ruled was when the Jews were there. The Jews made Israel their homeland, and they had a sovereignty for about 1,000 years. It doesn't mean that when Jews started returning after the exile in their masses into Palestine, that there were not other Arabs living there. And for a while there were actually coexistence. But it shows you the strength of the historical connection. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I think it's not enough to just say, well, we need that land because of security or because we are persecuted. No, this is our homeland. This is where our history lies. We should say that unapologetically. This was the same land that was then recognized by the international community. International rights. The League of Nations mandate for Palestine, still legitimate and valid today, recognize the right of the Jewish people not to, excuse me, build something new. It was to reconstitute their homeland. That's the strength of the historical connection. And this was, by the way, in 1920, the initial area. It was only 2 years afterwards that the British carved off 77%. And that became the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. That's the strength of the historical connection. And that connects to the divine rights and to international rights. So I want to end with one last quote. Do we have time for one last quote? Yes? Good. We've talked about a lot of things. We've discussed the importance of zooming out, relevant to Israel, but I think relevant to anything in life. When we read the newspapers, it's important to contextualize. Read things with a grain of salt. We've talked about emotions, that emotions decide for people, reason justifies. And so if we want to communicate a message, we want to persuade people, it's not only important that we direct to their intellect, but it's also important that we move them in some way, that we tell a story, that we use visuals. Emotions and intellect together. The importance of reading things with a grain of salt, the importance of contextualizing, and what I want to end with is a clip from a rally, a lecture like this that was held in the University of California, San Diego. And there was a question in the audience. Someone asked a question. There was a Jewish speaker. And the question, I wouldn't worry so much about what she was asking, but rather about the agenda behind the question, because she wasn't really out to get an answer. She wanted to delegitimize the speaker. And instead of answering like many speakers just do, is go on the defensive and apologize all the time, he took a different stand. And I think this is a very telling example of pride and strength.
Good evening. I just wanted to say thank you for coming to campus tonight and presenting your point of view. It's always valuable to have two sets of views going on at the same time. Very useful. My name is Jumana Imad Musa Ahmed Al-Bahri, and I'm a student here at UCSD. I was reading your literature. I found that much more interesting than the talk. And I found some interesting things about the MSA, which is an organization that's very active on campus, and it is hosting our annual Hitler Youth Week. You should come out to those events. If you could clarify the connection between the MSA and jihad terrorist networks, because last I checked, we had to do our own fundraising, and we never get help from anyone. So if you could clarify the connection between UCSD's MSA, or if you don't have such information, if you could connect other MSAs on UCs, because the connection wasn't too clear in the pamphlet. Just if you could clarify.
Okay. Will you condemn Hamas here and now?
I'm sorry, what?
Will you condemn Hamas?
Would I condemn Hamas?
As a terrorist genocidal organization?
Are you asking me to put myself on a cross?
So you won't. I actually have had this experience many times. You didn't read the pamphlet because the pamphlet is chapter and verse. The main connection is that the MSA is part of the Muslim Brotherhood Network as revealed in the documents.
I don't think you understood what I meant by that. I meant if I say something, I'm sure that I will be arrested for reasons of Homeland Security. So if you could please just answer my question.
If you condemn Hamas, Homeland Security will arrest you.
If I support Hamas, because your question forces me to condemn Hamas. If I support Hamas, I look really bad.
If you don't condemn Hamas, obviously you support it. Case closed. I have had this experience, I had this experience at UC Santa Barbara where there were 50 members of the Muslim Students Association sitting right in the rows there. And throughout my hour talk, I kept asking them, will you condemn Hezbollah and Hamas? And none of them would. And then when the question period came, the president of the Muslim Students Association was the first person to ask questions. And I said, you know, before you start, will you condemn Hezbollah? And he said, well, that question is too complicated for a yes-no answer. So I said, okay, I'll put it to you this way. I'm a Jew. The head of Hezbollah has said that he hopes that we will gather in Israel so he doesn't have to hunt us down globally. For it or against it?
For it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming and showing everybody what's...
Did you understand that? Yeah. I have a litmus test. It's always the same. Because I don't engage with everyone. I don't dialogue with everyone. And the two questions that I ask people is, do you believe in the right of the Jewish people to a nation state? If the answer is no, there's no room for dialogue. Do you believe in the right of the Jews, the Jewish country, the Jewish army to defend itself? If the answer is no, there's no room for dialogue. If the answer is yes, let's have a conversation. Let's talk about the complexities. Israel has issues, believe me. We're not a perfect state. No country in the world is a perfect state. And I'm not just giving that lip service. There are real issues that Israel's dealing with. But sometimes there is this expectation that we need to abide by impossible moral standards. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. You know, people will say the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, and the Israeli government is immoral and inhumane. And so my answer to them is another question. Compared to whom? Now when I say that, some people will come back and say, well, you know, two wrongs don't make a right, don't change the conversation, don't divert attention to the rest of the Middle East. Israel has real problems. And that's a valid concern. So I go further and I say, no, compared to whom? And stay with me for a little bit. And then I'll start at the worst of the worst, and I'll say, compared maybe to, let's see, the Syrians, who over the last 4 years have killed over 500,000, regime using chemical weapons on its people. Compared to that, maybe not. Compared to the Jordanians, who in 1970 killed over 10,000 Palestinians who dared rise against the Hashemite regime. Compared to that, is Israel immoral and inhumane? Maybe compared to the French in the 60s, who killed thousands of Algerians who dared rise against French colonialism. Compared to that, is Israel immoral and inhumane? I don't think so. What about the Chinese and how they treat their own people? or the Tibetans, or the Russians in Chechnya and Georgia, compared to that? Is Israel immoral and inhumane? Compared to what? America in Afghanistan, Bosnia, NATO forces in Bosnia? And I'm not criticizing these countries, but if you look at Israel's conduct and Israel's record, we're doing pretty well in dealing with such guerrilla warfare. And so my final question is, compared to whom is Israel immoral and inhumane? Compared to a utopian standard of perfection? Yes. But so is any other army, any other country in the world. And to put Israel on this pedestal and to expect it to abide by, I'm sorry, impossible moral standards, that's inhumane. Okay? Here's a quote that I want to end with, and it's about this, the importance of standing up for what we believe in. You know, I don't take it for granted that I'm here in such a warm community, my home, my childhood community, and experiencing such support for the cause. I don't take it for granted, and I think sometimes we need to hear it from others so that we can connect to the love that we have for our country, because we're not always, because it's difficult sometimes. You know, if you look at what's written in the media, if you look at the world. So I don't take this support for granted at all. And I really appreciate everything that you do for Israel and for the Jewish people. When people come with criticism of Israel, they might say, you know, apartheid, Israel's an apartheid state, and you'll have a good answer for that. But then they'll say occupation, and you'll explain that. And then they'll say checkpoints, and you might explain that. But as long as we're on the defensive and apologetic, it's ineffective. There comes a point where we need to put our foot down and go on the offense. Not be offensive, but go on the offense and have some pride. This quote by Zeev Magen from Bar Ilan University addresses that. A man calls you a pig. Do you walk around with a sign explaining that in fact you are not a pig? Do you hand out leaflets expostulating in detail upon the manifold differences between you and a pig? A pig has a snout, I have a nose. A pig wallows in mud. I only occasionally step in a puddle, and then of course inadvertently. Do you stand on a soapbox and discourse your erudity on why in general it's extremely not nice to call people pigs, and appeal to the populace to please have no truck with an individual rude and nasty enough to say such things about an upstanding citizen like yourself? Fellow Jews, fellow Christians, where is your dignity, where is your abhorrence of useless, thoughtless, counterproductive endeavor? Big words. The bottom line is we need to have strength. We need to have pride and conviction. In Hebrew, it's called tzidkat haderech, the justice of the cause. I believe that to be pro-Israel, to be a Zionist, is for the most part to have truth and justice on our side, and I think we need to be proud of that. Thank you very much.